Everywhere you look, these Democrats who so arrogantly, pompously claimed they understood governance and would make Washington work properly, who for years told us Trump was illegitimate and that they'd uphold democratic norms, who bleated till they were blue in the face about Trump's cruelty and said they'd bring compassion. These Democrats, Biden, Harris, Pelosi, Schumer, just look at them now. Their agenda imploding, their policies failing, their humanitarian crises multiplying. It is all falling apart. Incompetent, illegitimate, inhuman. The exact opposite of everything they pretended to be. Everything they touch turns to crap. Trump handed them a strong, effective vaccine in record time. They screwed it up with chaos over boosters and their insane anti-science imbecilities about protecting the already vaccinated. Trump handed them a strong economy, energy independence, low tax, less regulation, pro-growth. Now look, runaway inflation, unfilled vacancies, a collapsing recovery. And of course, the most egregious failures of them all, Afghanistan, which Biden had the nerve to try and spin as a win at the UN General Assembly this week.
And as we close this period of relentless war, we're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy, of using the power of our development aid to invest in new ways of lifting people up around the world, of renewing and defending democracy.
Relentless diplomacy, lifting people up. Tell that to the thousands of Americans and allies stranded behind enemy lines. Renewing and defending democracy. Tell that to the girls kicked out of school, the women kicked out of jobs, all the Afghans who, as the Taliban announced this week, will now have their hands sawn off in public thanks to Biden's calamitous, pig-headed insistence on running away, just so he could say by September the 11th that he'd ended the war. He failed even at that. He didn't end the war. He restarted it as Afghanistan becomes a terror safe haven again. Relentless diplomacy, lifting people up. It is clueless impulsivity, leaving people behind.
And as the United States turns our focus to the priorities and the regions of the world, like the Indo-Pacific, that are most consequential today and tomorrow, we'll do so with our allies and partners through cooperation at multilateral institutions like the United Nations. Over the last 8 months, I prioritized rebuilding our alliances, revitalizing our partnerships. We will not go it alone.
Oh yeah, such cooperation with multilateral institutions that you got the Germans saying Biden caused the worst crisis in the history of NATO. Rebuilding our alliances so well that our oldest ally recalled their ambassador. Revitalizing our partnerships. He can't even remember their names.
I want to thank that fellow down under. Thank you very much, pal. Appreciate it, Mr. Prime Minister.
How does that guy end up as our president? It is just unbelievable. Look at the total catastrophe he's created at the border, a massive humanitarian crisis, all because he wanted to rile up his party's far-left base, lying about the reasons, sending Kamala Harris to pathetically pretend she's going to fix the root causes, when everyone can see the root cause is Biden reversing Trump's policies and opening the border. Even as they tore the TV studios, touting their great success in clearing the disgrace of Del Rio, they're admitting that most of the migrants are just released into America. What message does that send to all the people from around the world doing the right thing and trying to become Americans the right way, the proper way? Biden talks about decency. This is the opposite of decency. Instead of an orderly system, it is a chaotic free-for-all that empowers criminals and smugglers. And with all these failures, all this incompetence, will there ever be any accountability? Well, at last we got an answer to that question this week. Yes, there will be accountability. Biden promised it.
It's outrageous. I promise you those people will pay.
Finally, people will pay. But who exactly will pay? Will General McKenzie, head of CENTCOM, pay for saying to the Taliban, you know what, it's okay. We don't need to control all of Kabul. We'll just keep the airport. Will it be the genius who mistook water canisters for bombs and sent the drone that killed 10 innocent civilians? Will that person pay? Will Blinken pay for failing to get thousands of our Afghan allies the paperwork they need and then saying he's doing everything he can to get them out? Will Milley pay for undermining the Constitution and the chain of command? For spending the past year puffing up his own image instead of preparing for a proper withdrawal? For conspiring with the Chinese regime? Will anyone pay For the chaos at the border, the screw-up over vaccines, the return of inflation, any of it? No, that's not who Biden was talking about. The people who are going to pay, the only people in this entire crew of incompetent muppets, the only people who are actually going to face any consequences are border officials that Biden's own open border policies put in an impossible position. They will face the full weight of accountability for not riding their horses the way Biden wants them to. That is the single, solitary thing that Biden and Harris and all the rest of them seem to be worked up about. The only thing going wrong in our entire government, apparently. What a joke. What a total mockery of accountability. But it's not just the incompetence. There's no legitimacy behind their agenda. Look what they're trying to push through Congress. The largest tax increase in history, the biggest ever expansion of the federal government bureaucracy, rules, regulations, initiatives, programs, armies of busybodies interfering in every aspect of your life. Biden ran as a moderate centrist. He explicitly said he wasn't a socialist. They failed to win a majority in the Senate. They even lost seats in the House, so they barely have a majority there, but they're acting like there's some socialist party that won in a landslide, pushing a $5 trillion scheme to turn America into a centralized European-style welfare state. It is illegitimate and undermines democracy. On top of all this is the cruelty. They say Biden's compassionate.
The president also sheds tears when he tells stories. And it's one of the beautiful things about him is the compassion.
Where were Biden's tears for the soldiers whose deaths he caused in Kabul? Where were Biden's tears for the aid worker he took out with a drone strike, for the 7 children killed just to try and make Biden look tough? Where were his tears for the babies being passed over barbed wire by parents desperate to save them? Where were his tears for the toddlers dropped like sacks of potatoes over the border? Where were his tears for the terrified children abandoned by coyotes in a country completely foreign to them? I've been asking myself, why has it all fallen apart so quickly? We've seen Democrat presidents before. We can disagree with many of the things they did and said, but it wasn't like this. It wasn't an utter shambles, a complete humiliation for the country. And I think I found the answer this week in that United Nations speech. I looked it up on the White House website. It's worth doing, actually, because you suddenly realize what we're dealing with in this Biden regime. It's embarrassing enough that this, the greatest nation in the world, was represented to the world by a bumbling old fool who can barely string 2 sentences together. But the content, my God, I've never seen anything like it. Just a string of facile slogans and vapid cliches, saying nothing, conveying nothing, just a whole bunch of nothing. I'm not saying every leader should speak like Demosthenes to be taken seriously. Trump certainly didn't, but he had something to say. And no one was ever in any doubt what he wanted to do and why. Biden, there's nothing there. And the people around him aren't good enough to fill the hollowness. That's why it's all falling apart. Biden is nothing but an utterly mediocre machine politician surrounded by amateurs, hacks, and juvenile leftists.